The Michael Berry Show.
You know, this has been a really soaring administration because President Trump learned you can't trust those people. And he's gone in with all the momentum, right? It wasn't like that back in January 2017. One of the guys, probably the guy who was getting beat up the worst through no fault of his own, he was just taking the beating and getting back up, was Sean Spicer, the press secretary and communications director. And he's our guest. Welcome to the program, sir.
Hi, Michael. Good to be with you. Thank you.
You got to be thinking as you see Carolyn Levitt up there going, "Hey, I didn't have it this easy."
Well, you know, it's funny when you say that. I had a conversation with the president a couple of weeks back, and he was asking. He said, "You know, this is just how he operates. He always says, 'How do you think it's going? How's everyone doing?'" And I said to him, "Sir, I'm a little jealous." He started laughing, and he said, "Why do you say that?" I said, "Because, you know, we came in, he was very magnanimous." And he said, oh, that's nice. And I said, "Well, it's true. I think we went in for, you know, with all the best intentions. And to your point in your introduction, there were some people that didn't share that. And they thought that they either were there to serve their own agenda or to resist his. And I think a lot of it was new. And I've said to folks before, you know, part of the thing for me was I actually had this very fun conversation with him at one point, and we were talking about traditions and how the White House operates. And he looks at me and he said, "Sean, I'm going to be the most traditional president ever." And I was like, "Oh, cool. I know tradition. I got this." And that clearly wasn't the case. You know, he beats to his own drum, and he has his own style and his way. And it was a learning experience for a lot of us. And like I said, so I was so super proud to have been part of that. And but it's different. And here's the thing, Michael. I've identified three things: the people, the process, and the policies. And you touched on this at the beginning of your segment. And what I mean by the people is, last time he trusted a lot of people. They said, "Oh, I want to serve in the Trump administration," or they were recommended by somebody. And so he took their word for it. And they weren't people that were there for the right, necessarily, intentions. This time, the people that he's brought on board, he knows, he trusts, they understand the goal at hand. And that's a very different dynamic. Okay, so that's number one. Then we go to the policies. He knows exactly what he wants to do and how to do it. He knows what he wants to fight for, what he wants to accomplish. And the last is the process, which is he knows how to do it now. Not only the levers of government to pull, but where the resistance is going to come from. Okay? And that is important because he sort of, if you think about it, day one, Tom Homan's doing all of these immigration roundups. He knew what cities to go to, where to find them. They didn't just think of this out of thin air. It wasn't just, you know, maybe we should go to Boston, maybe we should go to Chicago. They knew where to go because they had been spending 4 years plotting and planning exactly what they would do if they got back in office.
And you see it. It is a well-executed strategy, brilliant in its plan and flawless in the execution. I also think that he brought in, you were a guy that was willing to withstand the slings and arrows. I think there were some folks who weren't. They were a little more retiring, a little more reticent, a little more reserved. You know, Mike Pence was not really a battle-weary partner for him. He's got guys that really enjoy going into the fire. You know, J.D. Vance and Pete Hegseth and Tulsi, and each one of them ready to take on the battle. And I feel like that allows him, you know, like a leader, a president with his generals. It allows him to dissipate some of that, to spread some of that. Elon takes a lot of that hatred, and I think that. I'd be curious to know your thoughts, but I think that has helped him a lot as well.
100%. I mean, look at the thing that the media gets wrong, Michael, is they keep saying, "Oh, he's surrounded himself with loyalists." A dog can be loyal. That's not nothing. These people are disruptors. These are people who understand the agenda and what the president wants to accomplish and are like, "Great, I got it." So whether it's Tulsi or RFK or Pete Hegseth, Lee Zeldin at the EPA, these guys are coming in and saying, "Okay, we got it. We got the mission. We're ready to execute." And frankly, you're seeing the results. I mentioned Tom Homan, another guy who's going in there to do this. But there's one thing that I keep warning Republicans on, which is, guys, we've now seen, Trump got elected. He made a lot of great things happen. He helped secure the border, get us energy independence. And what's Biden do? Biden undoes all of that through executive order. And then what does Trump do? He undoes the Biden and reinstitutes a lot of stuff and then builds on it. And my message to Republicans, especially in the area of immigration, is if you like what President Trump is doing, then we need to codify it in law. Because if you look at where President Trump has gotten pushback, it's not this resistance that we had in the first term, it's the courts. And what are the courts saying? They're saying, well, the law is clear that X or not clear that Y. And so my point to my fellow Republicans is if you like what President Trump did, if you like what he accomplished, then don't let another president undo it. Codify immigration stuff in law. Figure out how many visas we want, how many judges, how many CBP or ICE agents we want. Set new limits on making us more of a meritocracy so we figure out, what kind of immigration system we want. But we keep fudging along and hoping that President Trump's going to stay in office forever. It's just not, as much as we may want that to happen, it's not going to happen. While we have majorities, and this is the other point that I try to make to Republicans, is I would love to believe that we're just going to get judged by, putting points on the board and delivering for the American people. But we've seen what it takes to get legislation passed. And God forbid we lose the House Republican majority, which is, tenuous at best. We got 2 more seats last week that somehow everybody felt like, oh, that was great. And I'm like, that's just 2 more. We're up to a 4-seat majority. Yay. But if you really want to ensure that things are going to happen, then use these next 18 plus months to actually codify the Trump agenda, especially in immigration, in law.
Let's talk about the border. Obviously something that y'all worked on very hard. I must admit, I have been delighted and at the same time surprised at the effectiveness and the swiftness with which this thing has happened and how successful it has been. Your thoughts?
Yeah, there's 2 things. Just one, it proved to me that if you focus on something, anything, it's not necessarily easy, but you can get results, right? So, whether you're trying to get in shape or sell something, or in this case, secure the border, what happened under Biden is they made the border open. People came in. They gave incentives to people to come. I tell this story all the time. I've got a buddy of mine that does a lot of federal contracting with the State Department. And in the Trump first term, they had a sign throughout America that said, the border is closed, don't come. When Biden came into office, they changed the billboards and it said, need help? Here's the phone number, right? It was a magnet to come into this country. Kamala Harris might have told people, don't. But the reality is that if you're told, if you do, though, we're going to give you a hotel room, a gift card, free phones, etc., you're going to come. They understood they wouldn't get kicked out. They wouldn't be stopped. And so they came. President Trump changed that in a heartbeat. And Tom Homan and everyone's rounding people up, making it clear that this is a priority of this president. But, it just showed you how much we were gaslit by the Biden administration, right, who told us, oh, we can't do anything. There's nothing wrong. There's no criminals here. Well, if there were no criminals here, how did President Trump just round up all of those Trinidad de Agua people and the MS-13 gangbangers? Because, under the Biden administration, they told us our border was secure, nothing was wrong, and it was clearly a lie.
It's quite interesting. Sean Spicer is our guest. He was the first press secretary and communications director for President Trump. Let me pull back for a moment on Trump. Let's talk about Sean Spicer. How has life changed for you? What does life look like for you today?
That's a great question. So when I walked into the White House, I'd been the communications director and the chief strategist for the Republican National Committee for 6 years. I'd been around Washington working for members of Congress. I'd just come actually off an active duty deployment. So I was just your typical staffer, and then walked in the Trump White House and got thrown, into the deep end real quick. And it was a challenging yet honorific opportunity to serve the country and to President Trump. And then look, it was funny afterwards. I did stuff that I mean, I have had some pretty cool moments since I left the White House. I still stay in touch with President Trump, as I mentioned. I talked to him on the phone the other day. He appointed me to the Naval Academy Board of Visitors. I've got two shows. The Sean Spicer Show airs every night, 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube. So I'm doing stuff, Michael. For the first time, I was always somebody else's spokesman.
Mm-hmm.
And now I get to talk about what I think and why I think things need to get done and what the priorities. I've written 4 books. I may announce a 5th one soon. It's been fun to do something when your whole life professionally was focused on, even in the military, I was a public affairs officer, right? And I've always spoken for other people and entities. And when you leave and get the opportunity to, launch shows, I have a show every morning, a live show on my YouTube channel called The Morning Meeting, where we talk about the issues of the day. And it's fun to be able to give people my opinion, my thought, my insight from 30 years of politics. And that's a very different place than I've ever been.
But I got to imagine with all of that and enjoying a little more, taking an extra 30 minutes on your cup of coffee or making one more lap on your morning walk if you so choose, or sleeping in on occasion if you want. I got to imagine for guys like you, having been in it myself, you have to miss the adrenaline. It's a drug. And I know there are days that you are missing that and wishing you were in there in the battle.
You know what the funny thing about you saying that was? I used to. When I left Capitol Hill and went to different places, I think that I found it like, I don't know if it's because I have kids now, they're teenagers. It's like, I think my priorities are a little bit different, having to want to spend time with, and I know it's always like this cliche Washington thing. I love it. Don't get me wrong. I will never, I'm so honored that President Trump had me serve as the White House press secretary. But now when I get to do stuff, like I wake up, like I said, I have this show every morning. It's live for an hour on YouTube, where I walk through with Mark Halper and a guy named Dan Turrentine. We call it The Morning Meeting. It's just continues to grow in popularity. Then I do my show that airs at 6 o'clock on YouTube. And like I said, I do a lot of writing. I write columns. So it's almost like I've kind of pivoted my love for politics into different ways. So now I can actually openly opine about what I like to do and what I like to say. And so I'm fired up. I get your point. Like if 10 years? Yeah, 10 years ago, I wouldn't know what to do. I used to work crazy hours at the RNC, and I'd have people tell me all the time, wow, you work crazy hours, and how do you ever find time? And it's because I love it. I love politics. I love the back and forth. I love, that no day is ever the same, and that I had a great team to work with. I mean, but there's something about like the last few years where I've enjoyed like getting to do things. Like I was on a reality show, as you might recall, Dance with the Stars. I did a Zack Snyder movie. There's stuff that as a kid from Rhode Island that my dad sold boats for a living. And to be like, I can't believe I opened the Emmys, for goodness sake, in 2017.
You seem to be having fun. I
well,
love
it. Yeah,
that about it. You survived intact because, as you know, a lot of guys don't walk away from this thing able to hold their head up. A lot of guys, it chews you up and spits you out. Let me ask you, you said it's about people, policies.
But Michael, do you know why, though? Here's why, though. Because honestly, I don't mean to sound like I'm not the best at a lot of things, but I have my priorities straight. And when the opportunity came to get an off-ramp, and I said this to the president, because he had been very gracious. He wanted me to stay in the White House. I was communications director and White House press secretary. And I said, Mr. President, you need a fresh start. And I knew that was my off-ramp. I honestly believe that God had said to me, Sean, I'm telling you right now, like this is our off-ramp. And I knew if I stayed longer, it wouldn't. And like I said, here we are 8 years later. I call him. He calls me. He was kind enough to reappoint me to the Naval Academy Board. He's endorsed all 4 of the books that I've written. He literally voted for me on a reality television show when he was president of the United States. That is a guy who, he's had my back. And it is, so to your point, like part of the thing is that I feel like I knew when a lot of people in Washington can't walk away from power. And I knew the day that I said that I was stepping down, that was going to change forever. It would never be the same again.
You know, when I assess what the president's been able to do, it's in a sort of Nixon's first term imperial presidency sort of manner. And because he has the House and the Senate, both of them with a tenuous, delicate, dangling majority that could change, and a lot of folks that, if they have the chance, would stab him in the back, but right now have to play along. It concerns me because if things have to go through the House or the Senate, we've had pretty good luck so far, but it does concern me. What concerns you the most for the continued success of this president in this country, which I know you care so deeply about? Is it the tariffs? Is it the financial folks? Is it Chinese intervention? What are the things that you see on the horizon and you say, let's just keep an eye on that?
Well, I think the greatest threat we face is from China, and I think that if we don't, I think President Trump needs a majority. We watched this first term when he lost the House majority. They spent all their time impeaching him, obstructing him, and attacking him. And so I think that people have to understand he needs to be able to have the runway, as I mentioned to you a moment ago, not just to, I love what he's doing now, the tax cuts, getting the border focused. But if we don't codify some of these things in legislation before, and maintain a House and Senate majority, I feel good about the Senate, less so about, so anyway, I actually worry that if he doesn't keep the majority, it stunts the progress that we've made.
No doubt. And it happens so fast that the momentum with which he started, and as you said, it was having a plan that you execute. You have kids. I don't know if you've been to youth sports, but I've coached youth sports, and when the other team is better than your team and you show up on the first day and you go, ooh, those kids, they've been playing together for years, and I got a bunch of kids their first year, and oh, wow, we came to the battle and got whipped. He did that to them, and it was a blitzkrieg. He came in and he just rolled over them, and now I worry, we've got to keep that momentum going. And that's my concern, and yeah. I know you've been in that room where you talk about how to jumpstart that momentum and get it going again.
100%, and that's the key. Is that stay focused, and I think the president has a focus, that he didn't. And again, it's not that he didn't. It's not. I don't feel like this is a slight to say, but I think he is so much more driven now. 4 years out of office has given him such different perspective about how to get the job done.
Yeah, I've never seen anything quite like this. I mean, we've had very few presidencies separated in this way, and I think once you're in the White House, you don't get better. We've seen a decline in presidents in the second term, and you're just fending off. But it's like those years in Siberia. It's much like when Nixon leaves the vice presidency in 60 and loses the governor's race in California in 62, and from 62 to 68. He got better and he got stronger, and he understood his support and he understood where his voters were. And I think those 4 years, oddly enough, even though he's being dragged to court, I think Trump did some very deep thinking, and I think he sought some good input. And he's a different man today, and he's a better leader because of it. He's more effective for sure.
Yeah, no question about it. No question about it. And so I think the time away, the assassination attempts were all critical in that thinking.
When you look at the American public's reaction to Trump, when y'all came in, he was still a shock and awe guy. People were still sort of frightened of him. I think people have come to understand, hey, he can say something. He can threaten something. He can promise something. He can insult somebody for being fat. It's going to be okay. Is it interesting, or what's your reaction to how America has learned to process Trump and understand that's just who he is?
Well, this goes to the point you were making. I think one of the things we've only had at one time previously in history is that when you're able to contrast, so normally, a president gets 2 consecutive terms, and, maybe you have some, you go, gosh, I wish we had them back or whatever. With Trump, when he ran against Biden, they contrasted their policies. Biden got into office, and then when Trump came in back in office, or Trump was running again, I think people said, okay, maybe we didn't like some of the style thing, but we really saw the difference in policies between Trump and Biden, and we need him back. And that was what I think was critically different, is that the American people had a contrast that was so different. So I was excited. I think it can't be overstated how impactful it is having 4 years between was.
Yeah, but what's amazing is, unlike Reagan, who comes onto the scene, 76, Ford holds on to the nomination, in 80, he comes back stronger. But he spends those 4 years in relative peace and quiet and meetings and this sort of thing. Those weren't 4 quiet years. I mean, those were 4 tough years of being dragged to court and insulted and threatened. And yet all the while he was reloading. And I think that I've never seen anything like this. It's a juggernaut, the likes of which I've never seen. You've been around politics, at the highest levels, but I've never seen a candidate like this, and I don't see a candidate in the offing like this. Let me ask you this. Do you think the president is able to hold his coalition through the entirety of his presidency? Obviously, the midterms are going to be important. Who out there worries you as a break in the facade, or break in the consensus?
I don't think any. I mean, look, I think it's rock solid. You've seen so many of these folks. We didn't have that case in the Trump time. I mean, the Freedom Caucus, when we were trying to repeal healthcare, was Trump's biggest opponent, and so now having, like, you watch just this budget resolution that passed. The Freedom Caucus, Andy Harris and Chip Roy of Texas, all eventually came on board. That was huge.
Yeah, and what I see is that his support is so deep and so committed and so zealous that you can't just oppose him if you are a Republican without being punished for it. His support says, hey, I got it, Massey, Roy, you got your high-minded position, but we're going to punish you. And I think they've learned from that. And that's a real impressive way to govern. It's a consensus government.
Well, but see, it's not just the person. Back when I was on the Hill for a while in the early 2000s, Tom DeLay was the majority whip, and people knew not to cross Tom because, he would exact political revenge. Donald Trump, it's not even that. I think people understand the movement will get you. It's not Donald Trump. People will your constituents will come after you. And that's I think, the big difference.
The Michael Berry Show.